That same month, August 1938, as Mussolini was formulating these racial laws, the Pope sent Tacchi Venturi to negotiate a deal with him. The Jesuits shuttled back and forth between Mussolini and the Pope until they reached an agreement. And this is actually the first page of the agreement with a little bit of the second page, because the agreement has 3 points. I'll talk about it in a moment. As you see there, the title of this is 3 Points of an Agreement Happily Reached the Evening of August 16, 1938, between His Excellency, the Honorable Mussolini, and Father Tacchi Venturi, SI, in order to restore good harmony between the Holy See and the Italian government that was disturbed in recent weeks. The points of disagreement cited in the title focused on 2 issues. First of all, on the racial campaign, whether the racial campaign would embrace Nazi racial theories deemed heretical by the Pope. But secondly, they dealt with another problem the Pope was very concerned with, namely pressure on the mass organization called Catholic Action, mass membership organization. The Pope, Pius XI, had long seen Catholic Action as central to the Church's mission. It was organized down to the parish level in male and female, youth and adult groups, and it was key use of the laity to help Christianize Italian society from the Pope's point of view. Of course, it also had international manifestations as well. But in Italy, it had been a constant irritation to Mussolini, who could never be comfortable with any popular membership organization that was not under his control. And periodically, the Duce had accused the organization of involving itself in politics and threatened to shut it down. In fact, had briefly in 1931, and one of these threats actually shut down the Catholic Action youth organizations till Tacchi Venturi was able to negotiate a deal like this. Over the previous month, as he began to be more worried about the Pope opposing his racial campaign, while he so desperately needed the Church's support for it, he began to apply pressure on Catholic Action because he knew this was the way to really get to the Pope. He had his envoys inform the Vatican that he thought Catholic Action groups were engaging in politics and that he might have to close them down again. So it's in this context that this kind of amazing document was prepared. In exchange for Mussolini's promise to allow Catholic Action to function freely in Italy, and that's what points 2 and 3, which I'm not showing here, deal with, the Pope would pledge not to criticize the racial laws and the upcoming anti-Semitic campaign. The latter point was recorded in point 1 of the agreement, titled The Problem, as you see here, Problema del Razzismo, and there it reads, "It is the government's intention that this problem be calmly defined in a scientific and political office free from the influence of outsiders, employing only the honest criteria of discrimination that the state believes to be its right to establish and enforce." For his part, Mussolini promised that the new anti-Jewish laws would not be any harsher than those that the Pope had imposed in the lands he controlled, which in Rome was till 1870, the end of the Papal States, the last vestige of the Papal States and the fall of the walls of the ghetto in Rome. In fact, the agreement says some of the restrictions imposed by the popes would specifically be excluded. It reads, "As for the Jews, the distinctive caps of whatever color will not be brought back, nor the ghettos, much less will their belongings be confiscated. The Jews, in a word, can be sure they will not be subjected to treatment worse than that which was accorded them for centuries and centuries by the popes who hosted them in the eternal city and in the lands of their temporal domain," unquote. In exchange for Mussolini's promise to remain within the bounds of church-supported restrictions on the Jews, the Holy See was to agree in advance not to criticize the upcoming anti-Semitic laws, as the third and final paragraph of the section specifies. So I'll quote, "Having said that the restrictions wouldn't be worse than those that the popes had imposed, It is the strong wish of the honorable head of the government that the Catholic press, the preachers, Catholic speakers, and the like abstain from discussing this topic in public. The Holy See and the Holy Pontiff himself do not lack the means to come to an understanding directly with Mussolini via private means and to offer him those observations believed to be opportune for the best solution of the delicate problem. The same day this document was signed, Dino Alfieri, who was then the Minister of Popular Culture, who was in charge of censorship in the press, called in all the correspondents, all the Italian correspondents and heads of newspapers in Rome, and told them to tone down the polemics against the Vatican because, quote, it looks like everything is being taken care of, unquote. Meanwhile, Italy's newspapers were filled with articles detailing how when the popes had temporal power, they themselves discriminated against the Jews. On August 17th, several newspapers ran articles under the title, quote, How the Popes Treated the Jews. And in all of them, they cite the Osservatore Romano, the Vatican daily newspaper story on the subject that had just appeared 3 days earlier. Over the next months, the Pope's entourage, I have a little montage here, including Secretary of State Eugenio Pacelli, along with the papal nuncio to Italy, Borgongini, and the world head of the Jesuit order, Latahosky, as well as the Pope's own personal envoy to Mussolini, Tacchi Venturi, did all they could to be sure the Pope abided by the agreement. Their efforts, as it turned out, would be placed in danger by the fact that Mussolini himself would not abide by the agreement. He insisted that the anti-Semitic laws be extended to prevent the marriage of Catholics who had been born Jews, in other words, Jewish converts to Catholicism, and that with other Catholics. Okay, so this battle over the merits, this one clause in what was a long list of restrictions on the Jews is what caught the Vatican's and the Pope's attention, and in fact got the Pope extremely angry. The problem was that in forbidding marriage between a Jewish convert to Catholicism and somebody born Catholic, first of all, of course, this went directly against church doctrine, that a convert, somebody who was sincerely converted should be treated as a Catholic, but also went against the Concordat, the part of the Lateran Treaty in 1929 that had been signed with Mussolini and the Vatican, which accorded to the church the right to determine what marriages would be legitimate. In other words, any marriage performed by the church should be automatically registered by the civil authorities in Italy. This is in the Concordat in 1929. Clearly, this racial law went directly against that. Yet, even through these tense days when the Pope was irate over this trampling of the Concordat, the men around him did all they could to patch up relations and prevent him from speaking out publicly against the racial laws. Again, I discuss this in detail in my book. It'll be out in a few months. Pius XI died the following February. In fact, his death was rather dramatically timed, too. He died on February 10th, 1939. February 11th, 1939 was to be the 10th anniversary of the signing of the Lateran Treaty. And he had called on all the bishops of Italy, of whom there were about 300, to come to St. Peter's for what would be a dramatic speech he intended to give. We know from the fascist archives and Mussolini's correspondence that Mussolini was convinced that the Pope was going to denounce him, the racial laws, and fascism, along with Hitler, on that dramatic occasion, and was extremely worried about it. Now, the Pope dies the day before. So the bishops had already come to Rome, getting ready for this big series of events that weekend, which was going to be on a Saturday and a Sunday. It's a Friday morning, the Pope dies. This, of course, Italians are big on conspiracy theories, and probably don't have to be that big on conspiracy theories to fantasize about this coincidence of timing. As far as I know, there's absolutely no evidence for any hanky-panky here, but you still hear conspiracy theories that are kind of interesting in some ways, not least because they involve the mistress, the newer now mistress of Mussolini. However, I will leave you with that, that thought. Now, what happens? So the Pope dies. The Pope has, in fact, he's so concerned to get his message to the bishops that he asked the Vatican printing office to print up a copy for each bishop to hand them at the ceremony. Mussolini has heard about this speech, as I mentioned. He's convinced it denounces him and so on. He sends word to Eugenio Pacelli, who in this interregnum, interpapal period, is the Chamberlain, and therefore in charge of the Pope's effects, gets word to him that this speech should not see the light of day. Eugenio Pacelli then gets in touch with the Vatican printing office, orders all copies of the speech destroyed, takes the original from the Pope's desk, along, by the way, with the famous original of the famous or infamous hidden encyclical that was to denounce racism. And neither of these would see the light of day until some decades after the death of Pius XII in 1958. 3 weeks after the death of Pope Ratti, Pius XI, Eugenio Pacelli becomes Pope, takes the name Pius XII. No criticism of the racial law would escape his lips. Thank you.